They say time heals all wounds, but my dear, some wounds don't just heal, they shape who you become. To my neighbors here in Malibu, I am just Margaret, the 72-year-old lady with the beautiful garden and the successful son. They see the peace in my eyes, but they have no idea about the terror that once lived in my soul. They don't know that when I was just 11 years old, an age when a girl should be worrying about ribbons and homework, I was locked in a cold, dark root cellar by my own father. Not because I had done something wrong, but because I was carrying a child that was the result of the ultimate betrayal by his own brother. I have kept this silence for over 60 years, protecting a truth that was too heavy to carry, but too important to bury. Today, I am finally putting down that weight. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. There are stories, no matter how painful, that must be told. I was born in Fairview, on the border of Texas and Oklahoma, in 1953. It was a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, and where secrets were kept behind bitter smiles and fence-line gossip. Our house was set apart from the center, a simple clapboard construction with a large front yard, a chicken coop out back, and a vegetable garden that my mom tended with much love. My dad, Robert, was a respected man in the region. He had a small general store where he sold everything from kerosene and tools to fabrics and candy. He was a man of few words, face always serious, who governed the house with a firm hand. When he arrived from work, we all had to stay quiet. Even the dog knew it was time to hide under the porch. Not that he was mean all the time, no. Sometimes on Sundays after church he would bring us hard candies or buy us ice cream. But it was enough for someone to do something he didn't like for all hell to break loose. My mom, Patricia, was the opposite, a petite woman with a soft voice and hands always busy. She spent the day between the kitchen, the garden, and the household chores. She had a special way of making pumpkin pie with clove that was known throughout the neighborhood. When the aroma of that pie flooded the house, we all knew that holidays or important visitors were coming. My mom spoke little, especially in front of my dad, but her eyes told stories that her mouth didn't dare. She had the sad look of someone carrying a heavy weight in her heart. There were 3 of us siblings, me, the middle one, my older brother James, who was 4 years older than me, and Susan, my little sister, 3 years younger. James helped my dad in the store from an early age, waking up before the sun rose and only returning when it was already dark. Susan was the joy of the house, with her pigtails and easy laugh, always inventing games. Our house was simple but well kept. In the living room, a sofa upholstered in rough fabric that my mom covered with a colorful quilt, a small table with the radio that was only turned on for special occasions, and on the wall, a wooden cross in a carved frame. The kitchen had a wood-burning stove that was kept lit all day in winter, a wooden cabinet where we kept the dishes, and a large table where we had our meals. My dad sat at the head. We didn't start eating until he said grace, and no one got up before he finished. I shared a room with Susan, 2 small beds with cotton mattresses, a wooden trunk for our few clothes, and on the wall, Sunday school cards we earned. James slept in a small room in the back, near the storage shed where we kept tools and sacks of provisions. My childhood was one of work and responsibilities. From the age of 7, I helped my mom take care of Susan, fetch water from the pump, feed the chickens. I only went to school half day. I studied at the Fairview Elementary School, a 2-story building in the central square with a bell that rang at 7 inches the morning sharp. I liked studying, especially when Mrs. Anderson told stories of faraway places, but it was a luxury that lasted little. At 10 years old, my dad thought I had studied enough for a girl and took me out of school to help more at home. The games were simple, but full of magic. With the other girls in the neighborhood, Linda from the bakery, Karen from the grocery store, and the twins Nancy and Lisa, we played Ring Around the Rosie in the yard, made rag dolls with scraps my mom gave us, or ventured to the creek that ran behind the houses, where we caught minnows with sieves and sticks. The boys had other games, tops, marbles, kites, and it was rare for us to mix. "A girl who plays with boys becomes bold," said my grandmother Betty, my dad's mom, who lived 2 houses down from ours. And so it was until I was 11 years old when everything changed. The change started subtly, like a small cloud on a sunny day, which little by little grows until it becomes a storm. My Uncle Richard, my dad's older brother, had returned to Fairview after years working in Chicago. He was a different man from the others in the region. He wore city clothes, spoke smoothly, had money in his pocket, and stories that made everyone laugh during the conversations at the store counter. He brought gifts for everyone: a new Stetson hat for my dad, a silk scarf for my mom, a glass marble for James, and a porcelain doll for Susan. For me, he brought a blue satin ribbon for my hair. "The prettiest niece deserves a special gift," he said while tying the ribbon in my hair. I remember his look at that moment, a look that froze my stomach, even without understanding why. That gut instinct is rarely wrong, is it? It's chilling to watch a predator weave his way into a family under the guise of generosity. And sadly, that blue ribbon marks the beginning of a nightmare that will force Margaret to grow up way too soon. Uncle Richard soon became partners with my dad in the store. They expanded the business, bought more merchandise, started supplying the ranches in the region. My dad looked happier than ever. He laughed more, brought more gifts home, even let us turn on the radio on Sunday afternoons again. But there was something strange happening. Uncle Richard started appearing at the house at different times, always when my dad and James were at the store. He brought hidden candy for me. He asked me to show him the garden, the fence, the chicken coop, places away from the view of the house. My mom seemed suspicious, but never said anything. Maybe out of fear of my dad, maybe because she didn't want to create problems with the brother-in-law who was helping so much in the business. It was a November afternoon, when the air was crisp and the leaves were turning brown, that things really got worse. I was alone at home. My mom had taken Susan to the city to buy fabric, and the men were all at the store. I was hanging clothes on the clothesline when I heard his voice behind me. "Getting prettier every day, Uncle's niece," he said with that different voice he only used when we were alone. What happened next, my dears, are things an one-year-old girl shouldn't know. Things that hurt the soul more than the body. Things that even today, at 72 years old, make my hands tremble to remember. That day I began to die a little inside, and it wasn't the last time. Uncle Richard always found a way, always an excuse. "I'm going to get a tool I lent. I forgot some important papers. I came to see if your mom can separate some chickens for Sunday." And always he found a moment to corner me in some corner where no one saw, no one heard. I didn't understand well what was happening. I knew it was wrong, that it was dirty, that it hurt, but I didn't know how to make it stop. Who would believe me against the word of the respected uncle, the partner who was bringing prosperity to the family? My dad, who saw a hero in his brother. My mom, who could barely look my dad in the eye when she needed to ask him for something. So I shut up, hid when I could, cried in secret, and prayed every night for it to end. But it didn't end. And 2 months later, when my body started to change, when the hunger increased and my stomach turned in the morning, when the blood that came every month since I was 10 suddenly stopped coming, I knew something even worse was coming. I didn't know exactly what was happening to my body, but my mom soon realized. One morning, while I was vomiting hidden behind the chicken coop, she found me, wiped my mouth with her apron, looked at me with those eyes that knew more than they said, and held my face between her hands. "My daughter, your body is different. You are carrying a child." Her voice trembled, but there was no anger there, only an immense fear. I crumbled into tears in her arms. I couldn't speak. Who? How? When? I just cried like a lost child, which was what I truly was. My mom hugged me tight, as if she could protect me from the whole world with those thin arms. "Your dad is going to be home soon. We're going to have to tell him," she said, with a voice that already announced the storm. That afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table, trembling like a leaf in the wind, I waited for my dad to arrive. My mom had sent Susan to play at the neighbor's house and asked James to stay longer at the store. She wanted it to be just the three of us for that conversation. When my dad entered, he already sensed something was wrong. My mom never waited for him sitting down. She was always standing, finishing putting the food on the table. "What happened? Did someone die?" he asked, taking off his hat and hanging it by the door. My mom looked at me, giving me strength to speak, but the words got stuck in my throat. It was she who started. "Robert, the girl is expecting." My dad furrowed his brow without understanding. "Expecting what?" "A baby, man. Our daughter is pregnant." The silence that followed was the heaviest I have ever felt in my life. My dad stood still, his hand still on the doorknob, as if deciding whether to really come in or run out. Then, slowly, he came to the table, pulled out the chair, and sat in front of me. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. Who was the bastard? I shook from head to toe. How to tell him? How to tell him it was his own brother, his partner, the man who was bringing prosperity to the family? Speak, girl. He slammed the table, making me jump. It was. The words wouldn't come out. It must be one of those boys from school, or Joe's son who hangs around here. I'm going to kill that bastard. And then, before I could think, my mom spoke. It wasn't any boy. Robert, I think it was your brother. The world stopped. My dad turned to my mom with wide eyes, then to me. I saw his face go from pale to red in seconds. Repeat that. My mom, who never confronted my dad, who always lowered her head, found strength I don't know from where, and repeated, I've seen Richard coming here when you're not around. He goes around trying to be alone with the girl. Just these days, I came back earlier from Nancy's house and saw him leaving the garden in a hurry. Margaret was there crying with her clothes all wrinkled. My dad got up so fast he knocked over the chair, came to me and grabbed me by the arms, shaking me. Is this true? My own brother? You let him. You provoked him. I could only cry without strength to defend myself. He forced me. He hurt me. I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth. He said he would kill me if I told anyone. My dad let go of me as if I burned. He took 2 steps back with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't pain. It wasn't anger. It was disgust. Disgust of me. Are you inventing this to protect some boyfriend? My brother wouldn't do something so low. It sounds cruel and impossible to believe, doesn't it, my dears? How could a father trust his brother over his own wife and child? But sometimes, the deepest pain comes not from a physical blow, but from rejection. My father wasn't just protecting his brother. He was desperately protecting his own pride, even if the price was his daughter's life. Sometimes, misplaced trust is the sharpest weapon of all. Robert, look at the girl. She's telling the truth. My mom tried to argue. Shut your mouth, he shouted. And for the first time I saw my dad raise his hand to my mom. She fell to the floor with the slap, her lips split. I ran to help her, but my dad grabbed me by the arm. He dragged me out of the kitchen, down the hallway, to the door that led to the root cellar of the house. It was a dark, damp place where we kept potatoes, onions, and other things that needed to be in the cool. You're going to stay here until I decide what to do with you and that disgrace in your belly, he said, pushing me down the stairs. I fell on the wooden steps, feeling pain all over my body. I heard the door close and the key turn in the lock. In the darkness, only a tiny thread of light entered through a crack in the wall. I stayed there, huddled, crying softly, so as not to irritate my dad more, who I heard arguing with my mom upstairs. The hours dragged on. Through the thread of light, I saw the day turn into night. No one came for me. I slept right there on the dirt floor, hugging myself, trying to protect that life growing inside me. Even without understanding well what it all meant, I woke up with the noise of the door opening. It was my mom bringing a plate of food and a glass of water. Her face was swollen, her eye black and blue. Eat quickly, she whispered, looking back all the time. Your dad went to the store to confront Richard. And now? What's going to happen to me? I asked with a broken voice. I don't know, honey. He's blind with rage. He said things. Horrible things. What things, Mom? She lowered her eyes. She didn't want to tell me, but I needed to know. He said he's going to resolve this, that he's going to take that shame out of you with his own hands, if necessary. My blood ran cold. I had already heard stories of girls who got pregnant before marriage, of how some families solved the problem. Generally, the girls were sent away, to the homes of distant relatives or to convents. But the way my mom said, it seemed like something much worse. He can't do that, Mom. It's a baby. It's my baby. It's his brother's son, she corrected with infinite sadness in her eyes. In your dad's head, it's living proof of his own brother's betrayal. I finished eating quickly. My mom grabbed the plate, kissed my forehead and whispered, Be strong, my daughter. I'm going to try to calm him down when he comes back. But my dad didn't calm down. When he returned from the store, I heard upstairs. He and my mom arguing, things breaking, then heavy steps coming down the cellar stairs. The door opened violently. My dad appeared, his shirt stained with blood, eyes injected with a fury I had never seen. "Your uncle denies everything," he said, voice hoarse. "He says you're a liar who must be wanting to protect some bum." "I'm telling the truth, Daddy. I swear on the Bible." "Shut your mouth," he shouted, coming down another step. "Do you know what he told me? That you were offering yourself to him? That you walked around the house showing your legs when he came here? It's a lie, Daddy. I never did that. He's my uncle. He hurt me. He threatened me. Please, believe me." My dad advanced to where I was. For the first time in my life, I saw my own dad as a real threat. I backed up to the wall with nowhere to run. "Tomorrow we're going to settle this," he said with a sudden calm that scared me more than the screams. "I'm going to call the midwife." My heart froze. The midwife was an old woman who lived on the outskirts of town. They said she helped girls in trouble. Everyone knew what that meant. My legs gave way and I crumbled to the floor. "No, Daddy, please. I can go away. I can go far away. No one will know. Do you prefer to carry your uncle's shame in your belly? Do you prefer everyone pointing in the street saying, 'There goes Robert's daughter carrying her own uncle's bastard'? I can go away. No one will know. And where would you go? Who would want a dirty girl like you?" Those words cut deeper than any knife. My own dad saw me as something dirty, something disposable. "Tomorrow morning I resolve this," he said, turning his back. "And then you will never speak of this again. We're going to forget this happened." The door closed, the key turned. I was left in the darkness again, but this time a new feeling grew inside me. It wasn't just fear, it was determination. There, in that dark cellar, with my hands on my belly, which was barely starting to show signs of the life inside it, I decided I wasn't going to let my dad do that. Somehow I needed to escape. In that cold darkness, a child was forced to grow up way too fast. But Margaret's spirit wasn't broken yet. In fact, her fight for survival was just beginning. You won't believe the risks her family is about to take to get her out of there, so keep listening. The days in the cellar dragged on like an eternity. My dad only came down to bring me a plate of food and a little water once a day. The first few times I tried to talk, to beg, to make him listen to me, but he remained silent, eyes fixed on some point above my head, as if looking at me was too painful. Sometimes, when he left, my mom came hidden, brought a thin blanket, an extra piece of bread, or simply sat with me for a few minutes holding my hand in the dark. Robert moved up the trip to Houston. She told me in a whisper on the third day of my captivity. He's going to get merchandise from the wholesaler, and he's taking the opportunity to visit his friend Bill. He only returns in 4 days. And then, Mom? I asked, fear squeezing my chest. He said he'll deal with it then. He's coming as soon as your dad returns. My time was counted. 4 days to find a way out, or that life inside me, and perhaps my own, would be lost. On the 4th day of my captivity, I woke up with the noise of the cellar door opening. It was before dawn. Through the crack in the wall, the sky was still dark. I thought it was my mom, but to my surprise, it was James. My brother had heard the fights, the screams, discovered where I was and what had happened, even though no one had told him directly. In a small house like ours, secrets had short legs. You need to get out of here, he said, looking nervously behind him. Dad comes back tomorrow. Get up carefully. I sat up, staggering on legs weak from being in that damp and tight place for so long. James helped me up the cellar steps. We crossed the dark kitchen in silence. My mom was already packing something in a kitchen towel. A little bread and cheese, she said, handing me the package. Then she took a folded envelope from her apron pocket. It's the money I saved from selling the pies. It's not much, but it will help until you find a place. Where am I going, Mom? I asked, voice choked with fear and sadness. To Bakersfield, replied James. There's a cousin of Mom's there, Mrs. Elizabeth. She doesn't know anything, but Mom sent a letter saying you're going to help with the household chores. She'll take you in for a while. I looked at my mom, who had eyes full of tears. And then, when the belly grows, when the baby is born, one thing at a time, daughter. First you need to get out of here, away from your dad, away from your uncle. She swallowed hard. Then we'll think about the rest. Who knows if your dad calms down with time? I knew it was an empty hope. My dad would never accept, would never forgive me. For him, I had stained the family name, brought shame inside the house. And Susan? I asked, thinking of my little sister. "She'll understand when she's older," my mom replied, tears finally running down her face. "We need to go," James interrupted anxiously. "Timothy is waiting with the truck at the end of the street." Timothy was a friend of my brother, a few years older. He worked hauling merchandise between the towns in the region. According to James, he had agreed to take me to the train station in Fairview, from where I would catch the train to Bakersfield. My mom hugged me tight, as if she wanted to keep the feeling of my body next to hers. "Go with God, my daughter. Take care of yourself, and take care of that little angel growing inside there. Don't let anyone hurt you again." We couldn't say anything more. The lump in the throat prevented words. James pulled me by the hand, and we left through the back door. The cold air of the early morning made my skin bristle. I was wearing only a simple dress and a wool sweater, the same clothes I was wearing when I was locked in the cellar. On my feet, leather sandals already worn from use. James guided me behind the houses, avoiding the main streets where someone could see us. When we reached the highway leading out of town, we saw Timothy's truck waiting as agreed. He signaled nervously. "Hop in the back and stay hidden under the tarp," said Timothy, without even looking at me properly. "If anyone stops the truck, don't make a noise." James helped me up and covered me with the tarp. Underneath it, between the sacks of corn, I could barely breathe. The smell of dust and sweat permeated everything. The truck started to move. Every bump was a pain in my body, already sore from the days in the cellar. "I'm going to try to convince Dad," said James, his voice almost lost in the noise of the wheels. When things calmed down, who knows, but his voice had no conviction. We both knew I was leaving that house forever. The trip to the station was slow and painful. When we finally arrived, the sky was already beginning to lighten. James helped me down from the truck and took me to a secluded corner of the small station. "The train passes in an hour," he said, handing me a small package. "Here is your ticket and a little money that Timothy and I put together." "Thank you, James," I managed to say with a voice weak with emotion. My brother looked sideways nervously. "I need to get back before Dad wakes up and realizes I took the cellar key. Will you be okay?" I nodded, though not sure. He hugged me quickly and ran back to the truck where Timothy waited impatiently. There alone, in the almost deserted station, with only an improvised bundle and a heavy heart, I waited for the train that would take me away from everything I knew. The train arrived punctually, releasing steam and noise. I boarded with trembling legs. I found an empty seat and sat down. As the train began to move, I looked out the window. Fairview, the town where I was born and raised, was being left behind. A part of me died there along with my stolen childhood. Walking away from the only home you've ever known at 11 years old requires a kind of bravery most of us can't imagine. As the train whistles and Fairview fades into the distance, Margaret is safe for now, but the real challenge of surviving on her own is just around the corner. That was a train of destiny. It carried me away from everything I knew, but it also carried me away from hell. I sat there, hand on my belly, wondering what kind of future awaited a child carrying a child. I was terrified, yes, but the taste of freedom was stronger than the fear. Sometimes, to find our true lives, we must find the courage to board a train without knowing exactly where it leads, don't you think? The journey was long. I had to change in Amarillo, waiting hours for the connection to Bakersfield. People looked at me with curiosity. A girl alone with simple clothes, traveling without the company of adults. I kept my head down, avoiding glances, answers, questions. I arrived in Bakersfield already at night. The station was more crowded than the one in Fairview, with people rushing back and forth. I stood there, lost, not knowing where to go. In the letter my mom sent, she had given the address of Cousin Elizabeth, but I had no idea how to get there. A man in uniform approached. He was a station employee. "Are you lost, little girl?" I showed the address, scribbled on the paper. He frowned. "That's on the other side of town. It's far to walk, especially at night." My eyes filled with tears. He must have felt pity because he called a boy who was nearby. "Tyler, take this girl to Magnolia Street. It's far, but I'll give you a tip." The boy, who couldn't have been more than 16, accepted. He had an old bicycle with a rack on the back. "Sit here and hold on tight," he said, indicating the rack. It was like that, holding onto the waist of a stranger, that I arrived at Mrs. Elizabeth's house. It was a simple construction, similar to my family's, but with a well-kept garden in front, full of flowers. I knocked on the door with my heart in my mouth. What if she's not there? What if she doesn't accept me? The door opened, revealing a lady with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked at me with suspicion. "Who are you?" "I'm Margaret, Patricia's daughter. Did you receive her letter?" Her face softened a little. "I received it, yes, but I didn't expect you so early." She looked at the boy on the bicycle, who was waiting a few steps away. "You can go, boy. The girl is safe now." He waved and pedaled away into the darkness. "Mrs. Elizabeth opened the door wider, allowing me to enter. The house was small, but cozy. In the living room, a worn sofa, a small table with a crocheted tablecloth, and on the wall the same religious pictures that decorated my family's house. "Your mom said you were coming to help with the housework, that you needed a change of scenery." I just nodded without knowing what to say. She studied me for a moment, her eyes going down to my belly, which didn't yet show signs of the life within. "Are you hungry? There's soup on the stove." I nodded, suddenly conscious of the hunger that had accompanied me for days. She guided me to the kitchen, served me a bowl of beef and potato soup, and sat in front of me, watching me while I ate. "Your mom didn't tell me the truth," she said suddenly. "Truth?" I froze with the spoon halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" "I wasn't born yesterday, girl. A mother doesn't send an one-year-old daughter far away just to help with chores." I lowered my eyes, unable to face her. I put the spoon back in the bowl. "You don't need to tell me now," she said more softly. "Eat your soup, then I'll show you where you're going to sleep." That's how I started my new life in Bakersfield, in the house of a distant relative who hardly knew me, carrying in my womb a secret that I didn't yet know would change my life forever. The days at Mrs. Elizabeth's house turned into weeks. At first, she treated me with a distant kindness. I helped with the cleaning, washed clothes, peeled vegetables for lunch, slept in a small room at the back of the house, small but clean, with a window that looked out onto an oak tree. At night, lying in the narrow bed, I hugged my belly, which was starting to show the first signs of the life growing there. Mrs. Elizabeth didn't ask, but I perceived her eyes following me, noticing the changes in my body, the morning sickness, the clothes getting tighter. One afternoon, while I was hanging sheets on the clothesline out back, she appeared with a dress in her hands. "It was my daughter's when she was expecting Anthony," she said, handing me the garment. "It will be more comfortable than those of yours." I accepted the dress with tears in my eyes. It was the first time someone openly recognized my condition, and did so not with judgment, but with compassion. "Thank you, Mrs. Elizabeth." She nodded and with a sigh asked what I knew she would one day ask. "How many months?" "Almost 4, I replied softly. "And the father?" I lowered my eyes, unable to answer. She didn't insist, just put her hand on my shoulder and said, "When you're ready to talk, I'll listen." 2 weeks later, what I feared most happened. It was Sunday, and we were returning from church. Mrs. Elizabeth liked to go to the early service when there were fewer people. We were walking down the main street when I saw a face that made my blood run cold. It was my dad. He was talking to some men in front of a store. He didn't see me immediately, and I pulled Mrs. Elizabeth into a side street. "What happened, girl? Looks like you saw a ghost." "My dad," I whispered, trembling. "He's there in front of Mr. Miller's store." Mrs. Elizabeth peeked around the corner, then pulled me into a passage between 2 houses. "That man in the dark hat? The one talking to Miller?" I nodded, heart beating so hard I thought I was going to faint. "Let's go around behind the houses," she decided, guiding me down a path I didn't know. "Are you sure it's him?" "Sure, Mrs. Elizabeth. What if he sees me?" I couldn't finish the sentence. When we got to the house, I was in a panic. I ran to my small room, gathered the few clothes I had in a bundle. "What are you doing?" asked Mrs. Elizabeth from the doorway. "I need to go. If my dad finds me here, he'll take me back, or worse." Just when it seemed like she could finally breathe, the past came knocking in the most terrifying way possible. It's a harsh reminder that true safety is hard to come by, but where Margaret goes next will change her destiny forever and introduce her to the people who will finally save her. She entered, closed the door behind her, and sat on the edge of the bed. "I think the time has come for you to tell me what's really happening." And then, for the first time, I told everything. The abuse by my uncle, the discovery of the pregnancy, my dad's reaction, the days in the cellar, the desperate escape. I spoke without stopping, the words coming out like a flood finally breaking the dam. When I finished, I was exhausted, tears drying on my face. Mrs. Elizabeth remained silent for a long moment, eyes fixed on the wall, as if seeing beyond it. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "Your mom knew you were expecting when she sent you here. She knew, and still she didn't tell me the truth." She shook her head, but didn't seem angry. "I understand her fear, but that complicates things. Are you going to send me away?" I asked, fear squeezing my chest again. "No, child, but I can't keep you here. Not with your dad in town. Bakersfield isn't that big. Soon someone will comment about Patricia's cousin, who is raising a pregnant girl. Where do I go? So, I have a friend, Sister Mary. She works at Street Catherine's shelter in Malibu. Is it a place for girls in trouble? An orphanage?" I asked, fear growing. "No, it's not a shelter run by nuns in the strict sense. They help girls who need a safe place to have their babies. No one asks questions there. No one judges." I pondered the idea, going to another unknown place, starting over. But what else could I do? My dad won't look for me there. He has no way of knowing you went there. And even if he finds out, the nuns won't let him take you. The Mother Superior isn't afraid of the bishop, let alone a common man. That same night, Mrs. Elizabeth wrote a letter to Sister Mary. The next day, very early in the morning, she took me to the station, bought my ticket to Malibu, and gave me a package with food for the trip. "When you get there, look for Street Catherine's shelter. Show this letter to Sister Mary. She will take care of you." I hugged Mrs. Elizabeth with all the strength I had. She had taken me in without asking questions, and now she was helping me once again. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Elizabeth. Go with God, honey, and take care of that little angel growing inside there." The trip to Malibu was calmer than the first one. I was no longer that scared girl fleeing in the middle of the night. I still had fear, still carried the pain of what had happened, but I also carried a new strength, the determination to protect that life growing inside me. Upon arriving in Malibu, I asked a gentleman sweeping the sidewalk of the station where Street Catherine's shelter was. "It's on the edge of town near the ocean," he explained. "A few miles from here if you follow this road to the end, then turn right at Quincy's Market. You'll see the white walls." I thanked him and started the walk. The day was hot, the strong sun making me sweat inside the long dress Mrs. Elizabeth had given me. When I finally sighted the white walls of the shelter, my legs were already trembling with fatigue. The shelter was an old Spanish-style building with a large iron gate in front. I pulled the bell cord and waited. Minutes later, a young nun opened a small door in the gate. "How can I help you?" she asked, looking at me with curiosity. "I'm looking for Sister Mary. Mrs. Elizabeth from Bakersfield sent me." She opened the gate, inviting me to enter. The internal courtyard was wide, with a well-kept garden and some girls sitting on stone benches talking or sewing. "Wait here," said the young nun, indicating a bench under a tree. I sat down, observing the place that could be my new home. The girls looked at me sideways, curious about the newcomer. Some seemed very young, others almost in adolescence. Several had pronounced bellies in different stages of pregnancy. Minutes later, the young nun returned, accompanied by an older lady with round glasses and a severe but not unkind air. "You must be Margaret," she said, sitting next to me on the bench. "I am Sister Mary. Mrs. Elizabeth sent a telegram, letting me know you were coming." I handed the letter Mrs. Elizabeth had written. Sister Mary read in silence, lips pressed together. "I understand," she said finally, folding the letter carefully. "You can stay with us, child. This is a place of refuge for girls who need protection." "I have no way to pay," I said, remembering that the money my mom and James had given me was almost running out. "The shelter lives on donations and the work of the residents themselves. Everyone contributes how they can. In the kitchen, in the laundry, in the garden, in the sewing workshop, you will receive a roof, food, medical care, and when the time comes, help to have your baby in safety." "And then?" I asked the question that hadn't left me since I discovered the pregnancy. "What happens after the baby is born?" Sister Mary adjusted the glasses on her face, studying me for a moment before answering. "That depends on you, Margaret. Some girls leave their babies for adoption. We have good families who take in these children. Others decide to keep their children, and we help them start life over outside with a job, a place to live. The choice will be yours. The idea of handing my baby to strangers made my heart squeeze. Despite everything, the age, the horrible circumstances of conception, that child was mine. It was the only family I had left now. I want to keep my son, I said, with a certainty that surprised me. Sister Mary nodded as if she already expected that answer. Then let's prepare for that. But first you need to rest. You look exhausted. She called the young nun who had received me. Sister Sarah, take our new resident to the newcomer's dormitory, then show her where she can bathe and change clothes. That's how I entered Street. Catherine's shelter, the place that would be my refuge for the next few months, where I would learn new skills, make unlikely friends, and where finally my son would be born, far from violence and hatred, in an environment of peace and acceptance. The months at the shelter passed like the seasons, each bringing its own joys and difficulties. My belly grew, and with it my determination. In the shelter I found more than a refuge. I found a temporary home and people who became like family. There were 15 other girls when I arrived, some older, others even younger than me, each with her story, her pain, her secret. We never asked each other the details. It was an unwritten rule among us. But at night, in the dormitories, we shared our fears about childbirth, our hopes for the future, our dreams for our unborn children. The nuns were strict, but fair. The routine started early. At 5 inches the morning, the bell rang for prayers, then simple coffee in the refectory, and then each to her designated task. Some worked in the garden, others in the kitchen, in the laundry, in cleaning. I was assigned to the sewing workshop, maybe because Sister Mary had noticed my agile hands, or maybe because with the belly growing, heavier work was difficult. In the workshop I learned much more than sewing. I learned to make delicate repairs, to embroider initials on sheets, to transform scraps into beautiful quilts. Sister Karen, who coordinated the workshop, was a demanding teacher, but patient. "Sewing is like life, Margaret," she would say, observing my uneven stitches. "You need patience, attention to detail, and to know that every stitch matters for the final design." While my hands learned the art of sewing, my heart learned the art of acceptance. At first I carried a lot of anger at my uncle for what he had done, at my dad for not believing in me, even at God for allowing all that. The nuns never tried to convince me to forgive. They just listened when I needed to talk, and respected my silence when words failed. It was in the 7th month of pregnancy that I received the first letter. It was from James, my brother. The letter had gone through a long path, first to Mrs. Elizabeth in Bakersfield, who then forwarded it to the shelter. I opened it with trembling hands. "Dear sister," he wrote in irregular handwriting, "I hope this finds you well. Here things have changed a lot. Dad found out you ran away the same day. He went crazy. He went to Bakersfield looking for you, but you had already left. When he returned, his anger turned against Uncle Richard. There was a terrible fight at the store. Uncle denied everything, called Dad crazy. In the end, their partnership ended. Uncle Richard went back to Chicago, and Dad kept the store. But business is bad. Mom is sad. Susan asks for you always. I got your whereabouts from Mrs. Elizabeth. Write me when you can. Your brother James." I cried a lot after reading that letter. It was as if a piece of my past had reached me, reminding me that despite everything I still had a family. I replied the same day, saying I was fine, that the baby would be born soon, that I had learned to sew. I didn't mention my plans for after the birth. Not even I knew exactly what I would do. 2 weeks later, when I was already in the 8th month, I received another letter. This time, it was from my mom. The writing was shaky, as if every word had cost an enormous effort. "My daughter," she wrote, "I ask forgiveness for not protecting you as I should have. Your dad has changed a lot since you left. The truth came out. Your uncle confessed everything before leaving for Chicago. It wasn't out of remorse. It was out of revenge against your dad, who kicked him out of the business. Your dad is destroyed. He drinks every day, barely manages to work. He cries your name sometimes when he thinks no one is listening. I don't know if one day you will be able to reconcile. I only know that I love you and pray for your well-being and the well-being of that child. If one day you want to return, there will always be a place for you here. With love, your mom." That letter touched me deeply. My uncle's confession meant that my dad now knew the truth, that I hadn't lied, that I hadn't offered myself to anyone, that I had been a victim in my own home. Part of me felt immense relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but another part felt renewed anger. Why did my uncle have to confess for my dad to believe? Why was my word not enough? I shared my anguish with Sister Mary during one of our weekly chats. Men's pride is a terrible thing. Margaret, she said, sighing. Your dad preferred to believe in a convenient lie than face a painful truth. Now he is paying the price for that. Do you think I should forgive him? I asked, confused. It is not for me to say what you should do. Forgiveness is not something given out of obligation. It is a gift both for the one who forgives and for the one who is forgiven. But it takes time, and only you will know when and if you are ready. That conversation stayed with me for days. I thought about it while I sewed, while I ate, while I felt my baby moving inside me. I was immersed in those thoughts when the first contractions began. The labor was long and difficult, as was to be expected for a girl of only 12 years. 16 hours of pain and fear, holding Sister Sarah's hand, who didn't leave my side for a minute. When I finally heard the cry of my son, a healthy and strong boy, all the pain seemed worth it. David, I whispered when they put him in my arms. His name will be David. A beautiful name, said Sister Mary, who had come as soon as she heard of the birth. It means beloved, and that is what he was to me. But I must be honest with you, my dears. Love didn't wash away the fear instantly. In those first few weeks, late at night when the shelter was silent, I would hold him and feel a cold shiver run down my spine. I was terrified to look too closely into his eyes, scared that I might see a shadow of my uncle, a glimpse of the monster who gave him life. I would nurse him in the dark, crying silently, praying that he would only be mine, that my love would be strong enough to erase the violence of his creation. It was a battle I fought every single night, until one morning he smiled at me. In that innocent, toothless smile, I didn't see my uncle. I didn't see my father's anger. I saw only David. I saw only light. That was the moment I truly became his mother. Not a reminder of violence, but a gift, a new chance, a new beginning. Admitting that the connection wasn't instant is such a raw and honest moment, isn't it? It shows that healing isn't a straight line, but that smile from baby David was the spark that finally lit up her world. But raising a child alone is never easy. Let's see how she builds a life from scratch. Looking at that little red and wrinkled face, I made a silent promise. He would never know the circumstances of his conception. He would never carry the weight of the hate I had felt. He would grow up knowing only that he was loved, deeply loved. The following months were of adaptation to motherhood. The nuns helped me, teaching me how to breastfeed, how to bathe, how to calm the nightly crying. Other girls who had already had their babies also shared their experiences. It was a small community of girl moms, all learning together. But I knew I couldn't stay in the shelter forever. When David turned 6 months old, Sister Mary called me for a serious conversation. The time has come to think about the next step, Margaret, she said. What do you plan to do? I've thought a lot about that, I replied. I don't want to go back to Fairview, I said firmly. No, not yet. Maybe one day when David is older, when I am stronger. But now I want to build a new life for the two of us. I understand, she nodded. And do you have any idea where you would like to go? I would like to stay here in Malibu, if possible. I've already gotten used to the city. I know some people, and I learned to sew well. Maybe I can get a job at the seamstress in the Central Plaza, Mrs. Barbara. She commented that she needed a helper when she came to bring donations to the shelter. Sister Mary smiled. I had already thought of that. I also spoke with Mrs. Barbara last week. She is willing to give you a chance, and we have a small house, not far from here, that belongs to the shelter. It is modest, but clean and safe. You could live there with David, paying a symbolic rent until you manage to establish yourself. I couldn't contain the tears. It was more than I expected, more than I believed I deserved. Why are you helping me so much? I asked between sobs. Because I see in you a strength that maybe you yourself don't manage to see yet, she replied, holding my hands in hers. You went through something terrible, Margaret. Something that could have destroyed many people. But you are here caring for your son with love, planning a future. That is courage, and courage deserves to be rewarded. The following week, I moved to the small house on Camellia Street. It was a wooden bungalow with 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, and a small garden out back. The furniture was simple, some donated by the shelter, others by the community, but it was our home, the first true home David would know, and the first place I could call mine since I left Fairview. I started working with Mrs. Barbara 3 days later. I took David with me. She had arranged a playpen in the back of the shop where he could stay while I worked. My agile fingers and what I had learned at the shelter impressed the old seamstress, who soon began trusting me with more complex jobs. "You have talent, little girl," she would say, observing my precise stitches. "One day you're going to have your own shop, you'll see." I smiled gratefully for the praise, but also for the trust she placed in me. Someone believed I had a future, and that meant more than she could imagine. That was how we started our new life. David and I, one day at a time, one stitch at a time. Sewing not just fabrics, but also a new destiny free from the shadows of the past. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I looked at it with hope. It's funny how time passes, isn't it? It seems like it was yesterday that I arrived in Malibu with little David in my arms, not knowing exactly what the future held for us. And almost 60 years have passed. My baby in arms is today a 60-year-old man with gray hair and wrinkles on his face, just like his father when he smiles, a resemblance that only I perceive and keep with me in silence. Life was generous with us here in Malibu. After 5 years working with Mrs. Barbara, I managed to save some money and open my little sewing shop. It was tiny, just one room on Pacific Coast Highway. I started doing hems, cuffs on pants, adjustments on dresses, but soon the clientele increased. The girls of the city started looking for me to make prom dresses, and then came the wedding dresses. Fairy hands was what they called me. They said I didn't just sew fabrics, but dreams. David grew up there among scraps and threads, learning to respect work and effort. He was a curious, intelligent boy. The nuns from the shelter helped us a lot. They got a scholarship for him to study at St. Francis High School. It was there that he discovered a taste for numbers, for math. When he turned 18, he got a spot at the university in San Francisco to study accounting. It was hard to see him leave, but I knew it was best for him. "Mom, aren't you going to be alone?" he asked me before leaving. "I'll come back every weekend." And he kept the promise for a good while, until meeting Jennifer, a young girl from San Francisco, daughter of merchants. They got married when he was 23. I insisted on sewing her wedding dress, the most beautiful I ever made in my life. They settled in San Francisco, where David opened his own accounting firm. The grandkids came, first James, then Sarah, and later the great-grandkids, little Emily and Jacob, who bring joy to this old lady. I continued in Malibu with my workshop, which grew little by little. I hired helpers. I gave opportunities for other girls to learn the trade, just as one day Mrs. Barbara and the nuns had done with me. Some of them came from St. Catherine's shelter itself, which continued its work of refuge for many decades, until closing its doors in the 92nds, when the Mother Superior passed away. I never married. There were suitors, of course. Mr. Joseph from the pharmacy, a kind widower with gentle eyes, courted me for almost 2 years. He would bring me flowers wrapped in brown paper and wait patiently while I worked. But whenever he tried to hold my hand, my body would freeze. It wasn't that I didn't want companionship. God knows I was lonely. But the body keeps score, my dears. The trauma of that cellar, the betrayal by the men who were supposed to protect me, had built a fortress around my heart. I looked at Joseph and I wanted to let him in, but the terrified 11-year-old girl inside me would scream, "Run!" I sacrificed my own chance at romantic love to ensure that no man would ever have the power to hurt us again. It was a high price to pay, but for David's safety and my own peace, I paid it willingly. This silent sacrifice is a powerful reminder that for some survivors, safety is the ultimate form of self-love. It's a heartbreaking choice to make. But don't tune out just yet. You need to hear how she managed to fill those quiet years with a legacy that would outlast her pain. I preferred to dedicate my life to my son, my work, and later to my grandkids and great-grandkids. Today, at 72, I live a quiet life. I closed the workshop 5 years ago, when my eyes didn't see the small stitches so well, and my hands started to feel the weight of arthritis. But I still sew for myself and for the children of the family. I lived in that small cottage on Camellia Street for many years, but I bought this larger property in the 82nds when the little house became too cramped. Here, I finally built the space I always wanted, a special room, just for sewing, with my old machine and shelves full of colorful fabrics overlooking the garden. Every morning, I wake up with the sun, make my coffee, water my plants, and sit on the porch to watch the day begin. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I go to the senior group at the church. We learn crafts, do light exercise, and mainly talk. They are dear friends I made over the years. None of them know my whole story. Some parts are too heavy to share, but they all know I raised David alone and respect me for that. Sundays are for making pumpkin pie, my mom's recipe that I kept in my memory. The sweet aroma fills the house and brings me memories of childhood, the good memories before everything changed. I always save some for when David and the family come to visit me, usually once a month. It is a joy to see the house full, hear the stories of the grandkids, the mischief of the great-grandkids. I kept in contact with my family in Fairview for many years, through letters. My mom wrote every week at first, then spaced out to once a month, telling the news, sending photos of Susan growing up. James also wrote once in a while. About my dad, the news came filtered. I know he never fully recovered from what happened. The store closed. He had to work as an employee in other businesses. He started drinking a lot. His health worsened. When David was 10, I received news that my dad had passed away from a heart attack after years of struggling with alcoholism. I felt a complex mix of emotions, part relief, part deep sadness for the father he could have been, but wasn't. I returned to Fairview for the funeral, taking David with me. Stepping back onto that dry, dusty soil was the hardest thing I had ever done. The town looked smaller, grayer than I remembered. After the service, when everyone had left the cemetery, I stood alone in front of my father's fresh grave. I sent David to wait in the car because this was a conversation between me and the man who had locked me away. I looked at the mound of dirt, and I didn't feel the hate I expected. I felt pity. Pity for a man so consumed by pride that he lost his own daughter. I placed a single white flower on the dirt, not for him, but for me. I whispered to the wind, "I don't forgive you because you deserve it, Daddy. I forgive you because I refuse to carry your darkness in my heart for one more day. You locked me in a cellar, but I built a castle. You tried to bury me, but I was a seed." Walking away from that grave was the moment the heavy chains finally fell off my shoulders. Forgiveness is never easy, and it certainly doesn't mean forgetting the sins committed against us. I didn't forgive him because he deserved it. I forgave him because I deserved peace. Do not hold on to the burning coal of hatred, my dears, for the first person it burns is you. Let it go, so your hands are free to embrace the ones you love. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the survivor who had won. My mom passed away 5 years later from pneumonia. James married, had 3 children, and continued in Fairview. Susan moved to Chicago when she married. We lost contact little by little. Regarding my Uncle Richard, I never heard from him again after he returned to Chicago, and to be honest, I prefer it that way. Today, looking back, I see a life that wasn't easy, but was full. I transformed pain into strength, fear into courage. I raised an honest, hard-working son. I saw my grandkids grow, and now I see my great-grandkids blossom. What more could an old woman like me want? My dears, if there is one thing I learned in this long life, it is that no one has the right to take away our dignity. Not family, not husband, not boss, not anyone. What I went through at 11 years old was a terrible injustice. An uncle who betrayed the family's trust, a dad who didn't believe in his own daughter, but I didn't let that define who I am, you know? Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't escaped from that cellar. If I had accepted the fate my dad wanted to impose on me, I wouldn't have my David. I wouldn't have my grandkids, my great-grandkids. I wouldn't have known the nuns who took me in, Mrs. Elizabeth, who helped me, Mrs. Barbara, who gave me a chance. I wouldn't be Margaret, the seamstress that the city of Malibu knew for so many years. When abuse happens inside the home, it's like a storm that destroys everything. You feel alone, abandoned, with no way out. But I tell you, there is always a way out. There is always someone willing to extend a hand, even if it seems the whole world turned its back on you. It was like that with me. My mom risked everything to help me escape. My brother faced fear to give me a chance to flee, and later other people appeared in my path, angels disguised as ordinary people. Life is not just what happens to us, but what we do with what happens. I could have drowned in bitterness, in hatred. I could have given up when I saw that at 11 years old I would have to raise a child alone, but I chose to move forward. I chose to transform every stitch I put in the fabric into an affirmation that I was capable, that I deserved good things. If you are going through something difficult now, if you feel there is no hope, listen to what this 72-year-old grandma has to tell you. You are stronger than you imagine. Life can bend you, but it doesn't need to break you. And after the storm, believe me, comes the calm. In any country, in any culture, respect for human rights, especially of children, must be sacred. If you know someone in a situation of abuse, don't stay silent. Seek help from local authorities, from protection organizations. Be part of the solution, because no one deserves to carry the weight of violence alone. Sitting here, watching the sunset bathe my Malibu garden in gold, I realize just how far I have come from that cold, dark cellar of my past. The wounds of yesterday have healed into scars. They no longer cause me pain, but stand as testaments to a fierce resilience that nothing could ever extinguish. I have stitched my life back together with my own hands patiently and meticulously, one stitch at a time, to finally find complete peace, surrounded by my family. The darkness of the past can never again overshadow the radiant light of the present. Thank you for listening to this true story of my life. Please subscribe to the channel so we can continue to share faith and hope for brighter tomorrows together.